Well, I've I apologize the quality of my voice today. I've been getting over some allergy attacks that kind of hit me right when I landed, because the weather's been changing rapidly over here.
Yeah, and then
So,
you've had the weather of the of Europe as well, which
yeah,
is going to
yeah,
hit you more than anything.
yeah. So I'm going to do my best today. But I wanted to ask you what your relationship to these movies were. This is a sort of exercise that I've been wanting to do for a while,
Mhm.
of pairing these two movies together. Drive I've seen a couple times before, I had never seen The Driver, although it's been on my list for quite a while,
Mhm.
to seek out. It's kind of a hard film to find.
The
Now
driver.
there's a yeah, yeah. Now there's a
Mm.
nice new Studio Canal 4K of it, but
Hmm.
it's not streaming on anything other than YouTube. I found it on YouTube, available to watch right now for free. But yeah, what was your initial kind of relationship to both these movies?
Well, I got to which did I watch first? I think I watched the drive. No, I think I probably watched Drive first,
Hmm.
And the Driver, again, like you said, because it fell into obscurity and didn't have really a decent release. It wasn't until I had a DVD of it, which yeah, wasn't particularly brilliant
Hmm.
transfer, but it was serviceable enough. I didn't have anything else to compare it to.
Yeah.
And then I upgraded it on the Studio Canal version, but I only bought the Blu-ray of it because I thought that was good enough for what I
Hmm.
wanted to watch. I mean, it's pretty vanilla, the release. There isn't a massive amount on there. There's a couple of good little interviews with Walter Hill.
Hmm.
It's a great transfer, though. Studio Canal always do a brilliant job. But my relationship with it, yeah, comes probably via Drive and via my love of. It's interesting. I'm not somebody that's into cars.
Hmm.
Take it or leave it. I
Yeah.
drive a
Same.
bomb. I just drive something that gets me from A to B.
Same here.
But the only sorts of cars I really admire is those that have, yeah, history and mileage behind them. And
Hmm.
also, I think it's through the iconography of cinema. So when cinema heightens it, and I love car chasers in
Yeah.
cinema. I love the history of that. I love the trajectory that that's made, and understanding that both these films are absolutely integral to that. That if you plotted a timeline and you touched base every so many years on the greatest car chasers or car movies of all
Hmm.
time, then they would both be in there. And my relationship with Drive in particular, and I think this will be with a lot of people that will probably end up listening to this and have watched Drive, is the impact of the score and the
Yeah.
soundtrack on my growing obsession with synthwave. So I absolutely love electronica, and I've specifically loved that retro 80s sound that's been the Drive soundtrack elevated. It wasn't like the
Mm.
first. Um, I think it's Miami 1984 album that I think is considered the first synthwave album. There's actually a documentary, a really good documentary on synthwave,
Oh, cool.
which is really good, which I think you can hunt down online and watch for free, and it goes through the history of it. So that's my relationship with it. It's what's been left over from it, and me also using elements of what again has been born out of Drive in terms of the look, the atmosphere, the art direction, the album
Hmm.
cover, Kavinsky's Outrun album, then going into like his next album, Reborn. I listened to obsessively in the car. And I don't think it's left the car for about 2 years.
Mm.
This album I just listened to on loop. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of a music landscape as much as it is the landscape of it being an LA story. Um,
Yeah.
I've kind of taken away the music just as much as the visuals and this idea of the lineage of the chase movie. It's more than that. Obviously, the heist aspect and the getaway driver part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I would kind of illustrate it. And then I've come from basically breaking Drive apart and just sort of thinking, well, where is this from and what's inspired it? And then when you watch something like The Driver, which is a much better film in my opinion, I think
Yeah.
it's just a brilliant film. In fact, I think
It's
it's my favorite Walter Hill movie. I've
wow.
watched
That's
it
cool.
so many times since. And that's only within what I probably watched it the first time, yeah, maybe just after Drive. So
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about 13, 14 years ago. And yeah, just sort of really absorbing myself in a film that is just another illustration of what you can do and how you can reconfigure the Western, really. That's what I'm interested in.
Yes, there's a lot of Western DNA in both of these movies, I think.
Mm,
And I like what you said about Drive, with the soundtrack and everything. It's a movie that relies so heavily on the score, on the soundtrack,
mm,
but simply by the nature that there's very little dialogue. You're dealing with characters who really don't say a lot, so there has to be this thing that fills the space, and it does feel like one of those films where the soundtrack is its kind of own character.
mm.
Even using certain songs as motifs and themes, where they replay this song about whenever he's thinking about Irene or doing something for Irene, they play that kind of love song, and then the real hero song is
Yeah.
at first it's the first time you hear that, it's almost like introducing you to the character, but then by the last time you hear it, it's become kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of like completed his arc, more or less.
There's so much that you could literally do the whole podcast just on the score
Hmm.
and the offshoots of them, what that has inspired and how a lot of those different music artists and bands have gone on to do other things. I mean, there was a really Electronic Youth, I think it is, that did Real Hero,
Hmm.
which has been covered a lot. There's a really good acoustic version by a singer as well, which was very good.
Hmm.
And then they went on to do the soundtrack with Pilot Priest for the film Come True. Have you seen that film?
No, what is that?
It's excellent.
Mhm.
Don't want to give too much away. There's a bit of a Donnie Darko-esque thing going on. It's about
Okay.
an insomniac who basically goes and signs up for sort of a sleep experiment in order to try and help her sleep better. And that's all I can say, really. I don't want to say
Mm.
too much. There's sort of vampiric elements to it, and this idea of dream state, and the score to that. There's the main track to it actually that Electronic Youth did, and it's just brilliant. Yeah, and
Hmm.
it's both Pilot Priest and them together doing the music because it's actually Pilot Priest that directed the movie.
Oh.
Really
Oh,
talented.
2020. Okay, this is a
Yeah, yeah. I
pretty
think it's
recent
Anthony
film.
Burns Jones. I think that's who Pilot Priest is.
Hmm.
In fact, I think I interviewed him for Arrow. Yeah, I did. I interviewed him for Arrow Selects. And he's a really cool guy. He has a lot. Again, similar conversations to what we're having now. He's very switched on about where cinema comes from,
Yeah.
and he was, literally there in the early years before he became a filmmaker, just out on the streets, like sort of bootlegging cinema and like getting it out to like people that these films need to be seen. He was almost like creating his own little kind of avenue of curation, basically.
Hmm.
So when you talk to him, he's very much aware of that. So it's a
Hmm.
very, very interesting, all the different tendrils Drive has, and as a liminal movie that brings you in the same way a Tarantino movie brings you into cinema to explore all of those different tendrils and avenues of where you can actually go to
Hmm.
and teach yourself more about reading cinema and what it's all about and where those influences come from, that no film is in a vacuum.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
and I'll be honest, yeah, Drive. I'm pretty damn sure if you watched that as a 15-year-old, it'd be the most original thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But then when you watch The Driver, it's
Hmm.
practically a remake,
I
shot
know.
by shot,
Yeah.
beat for beat, character for character. It's only the it's only the texture of it and the retro aspect of it that kind of gives it something else. And also, I would say Wyndham Refn's approach, like brutalist approach
Yeah.
to filmmaking as well. That's what kind of elevates it. It has got an outsider quality to it rather than an American filmmaker making an LA story. which
Yes.
is always interesting. It's the equivalent of like Leone coming in and doing the spaghetti, doing a Western in the 60s. This
Hmm.
is like, Danish filmmaker coming in and making a Western of the tens.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of look at it, really.
Yeah, and there's all this interesting stuff with him being the one who makes this movie because, he famously doesn't drive himself,
There you go.
and is also not a car person. Even the writer Hossein Amini apparently doesn't drive either, and he kind of builds this movie off of just riding around with Ryan Gosling in Los
Hmm.
Angeles at night. Ryan Gosling is sort of driving him around, and he tells this well-known story now of he was very sick when they first met, and was kind of all these things were going on in his head. He was taking these drugs to help him, and they were also making him high. And they're driving around, and this REO Speedwagon song comes on, and Refn just kind of bursts out into tears and is singing along with it. And at that point, he said he decided the movie was about this kind of sad, lonely guy who drives around LA at night listening to pop music. And that is such a kind of strange thing to land on in terms of a movie.
It takes an artist though to
Yeah,
see that.
yeah,
And I
of
think it
course.
also takes somebody who understands film and what would be cinematic, because
Hmm.
I'm generalizing here, but I think, if you're going to give a camera and a crew over to somebody who's obsessed with cars, then you're basically going to end up with something extremely pornographic. It's
Yes.
like car porn. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not, you're not watching a film that explores character and sensitivity and juxtaposition and all of these things that Drive clearly illustrates.
Hmm.
It'll just become Fast and the Furious, which reminds me of like the person that sued, for
Yeah, for
basically
the
seeing
marketing.
the trailer, the marketing, and going
Hmm.
and seeing the film, expecting fast. I mean, what a moron.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
can say. Then
yeah. I mean,
you are expecting that kind of film,
yeah,
then you're not going to open your mind up to what cinema is, and what a film that just happens to have maybe one or two car chases in,
yeah.
and then
I
explore the storytelling, not the cars.
hmm It is remarkable that that it's a film called Drive, and
Yeah.
really the cars and the driving are kind of
Mm.
incidental to everything else.
Because it's the
There is
drive
that,
of the characters, it's the drive of
yes.
their kind of emotion and what drives him.
Hmm.
Is it his part-time job as a stuntman, or
Hmm.
is it him being a getaway driver, or is it ultimately about being driven towards, a attraction? And that's what I think that's what does separate it from the driver, and
Hmm.
in that it becomes very European
Hmm.
and kind of almost existential. Like you can kind
Yeah.
of just take it at a level where you just take so much more away from it than it being just this surface movie.
Well, especially when you just watch Gosling's performance and kind of
Mm,
read into all the very subtle, but very effective things that he's doing. I'm really glad that I did see this movie first. I watched it probably not long after it came out, I think, and I was in my early 20s, and I remember thinking it was super cool,
mm.
and it was one of the most visually striking movies I had seen in a while. But I'm glad that I saw it, because had I seen The Driver first, or had I seen Thief first, which I think is also a huge precursor for Drive,
Oh, it's incredible.
um, yeah, I probably would have had that attitude of like, oh, this is just some, European guy trying to do an art house remake of The Driver, and it's kind of all these things are copied note for note. But he's also just infusing a lot of his own sensibilities into it. Are you a fan of Refn's work generally?
Yeah, the ones I've watched, I
Yeah.
mean, even the ones that are more challenging. Is it Valhalla Rising? That's probably
Hmm.
the most challenging one
That's
I've
a
seen
tough
of
one.
his.
Yeah.
It's a really tough watch. It's not something I would watch again. There's a
Hmm.
lot of what I saw of it that I appreciated, but yeah, it kind of I think intentionally alienates you in terms of, that's exactly what's happening with the
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
But yeah, that I do find them interesting. I've only seen the first Pusher. It's a kind of brutalist sensibility it's got, and you can see that in Pusher definitely.
Hmm.
Um, Trying to think what else I've seen. So I've seen Valhalla Rising, Pusher, Drive.
You
Not
seen?
seen Neon Demon. I've been trying to find.
Mm,
That's really hard to get hold of at a
yeah,
decent
it
price.
is. Yeah, I became a fan of what he was doing with this movie, and then I think the next one I did see probably was either Valhalla Rising or Bronson, which Bronson is fantastic with Tom Hardy playing Charlie Bronson. Was really impressed with that film. Then saw Only God Forgives, which I was kind of mixed on. But again, just really loved what Gosling was doing. I think that the two of these people bring out really interesting things in each other as a director actor combo.
Mm,
And the Neon Demon, I am a huge fan of, although it's one of those films. It's kind of a love it or hate it. That
yeah,
he has this
I can
thing really
imagine.
with his kind of his entire filmography where people either think it's complete trash or they think it's really artful, interesting stuff. And I'm kind of in the camp of it can be both at the same time, because a lot of it is sort of emotionally cold and kind of empty, and he's doing a lot of flashy visual things, but it's also just very thrilling. We'll talk about sort of the end sequence of this movie. I think is so interesting how it takes this kind of wild left turn that you don't
Mm,
really expect. But the driver, seeing it for the first time, I was like, wow, yeah, this is in the DNA of so many things. The thing I noticed right off the bat was just the look of it. This kind of really, there are many other films from this time period that have this similar look. I guess it's maybe a certain stock that they're shooting on of this kind of hyper saturated. Everything's kind of this seafoam green, lots of greens
mm,
and lots of deep, like intense reds as well. There's a certain like kind of color spectrum that this film operates on that is also present in Thief, I think, which is so interesting that it has so much in common with both of these movies. And then I noticed the score to this film as well. It's kind of
mm.
eerie. It's kind of off-putting. You don't really it's almost like it doesn't quite fit with
Yeah.
with this film, at least when it starts out. And then the convention of having this driver listen to country music versus the driver in Drive listening to electronic pop music, I thought was a really interesting parallel. I had also not known that Drive was based on a novel until I most
Yeah.
recently watched it,
I've
which is
not read
kind
it.
of I've
I
not read
can't
it
I
either.
can't
Yeah,
reflect on
and
that at all, no.
yeah, it also kind of seems like I can't even imagine what that novel would be like because it's such a sparse,
Mm.
stark movie.
Probably a bit
There's
like an Elmore Leonard type
I imagine so, yeah.
thing, yeah.
Um, but yeah, the driver it definitely kind of rose to my expectations. Firstly, I think this is the best kind of use of Ryan O'Neill's powers that I've seen
Mm.
of his work so far.
God,
I
he's
was
so cool in it.
He's really cool, and it
Mm.
like the entire performance just kind of rests on him being really handsome and really
Mm.
like kind of defiant and arrogant and cold and a little distant. I'm really mixed on him in Barry Lyndon. I know that's probably his most famous, well-known
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
But when I watched that not too long ago, he just kind of felt miscast in that arena for me. But this is like, this is kind of an archetypal, goes back to the Western thing, right? He's
Absolutely.
almost doing a Clint Eastwood kind of man with no name
Yeah.
analog
I mean,
here.
both of them are called the driver,
Yeah.
and yeah, that kind of driver with no name aspect is so on the nose. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously that's coming from Walter Hill's obsession with westerns. A lot of filmmakers of his generation in particular grown up with Howard Hawks and
Hmm.
just loving and kind of aping elements of those filmmakers. But I think Walter Hill, and I think it's something he picks up on as one of the interviews on the Studio Canal release. He is so transparent with how again, this element of influence where, you don't have Tarantino without Leone, you don't have Leone without Kurosawa, you don't have Kurosawa without John Ford, you don't have John Ford without D.W. Griffith, you don't have D.W. Griffith without sort of great painters, and
Hmm.
you can just keep taking it as far back as
Yeah.
possible. The other thing as well is it's interesting. I like to watch The Driver, imagining that he is the father of Ryan Gosling's character.
Mm,
It's a quite an
that's very interesting.
interesting element to kind of add to it. It's a very obvious thing because you go in and you just think, "Oh my God, this is the same person." And the
Hmm.
closest you can then get to that is think, "Yeah, what if?" There's
Yeah.
like it's a spiritual sequel in a way.
Yeah.
There's elements of it that just he acts the same. He sort of he's again, there's a coldness that he holds back, yet with Gosling's character, he kind of embraces um like wanting to be with somebody and the potential
Yeah.
for sort of leaving things behind, and how he's going to help somebody.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
hard to kind
everything's
of,
beautiful about it. Everything. Beautiful faces, beautiful
yes.
landscape. It's the neon aspect of it, the whole thing with Walter Hill trying to push the car chase even further and claiming that it was the first ever nighttime car chase as well.
Hmm. Oh, he did. That's right. The chases are extraordinary in this movie.
Amazing.
I
Like
think
it's
there's,
so like you're in the driving seat, literally.
yeah,
It's so good.
yeah,
And
they're
then do you
really
remember the
great.
computer game, the precursor to the 3D version of Grand Theft Auto Driver?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Driver series, I mean, that is blatantly
Yeah.
based on the Driver.
Yeah.
Uh, and they were great games. Like they were,
Mm.
oh my God. And then just Grand Theft Auto came along and took the same model
Yeah.
and
Blew
just
it out of
kind
the
of thought, well,
water.
I tell you what, let's not do the like bird's eye view
Yeah.
for 2D format. Let's just like lift Driver and just make it more expansive
Hmm.
and cinematic. And
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto then really took on that idea of what a video game could be.
Hmm.
The history of video games. That's obviously gonna be in there. Be interesting to see when the first 3D game, the 3D version of Grand Theft Auto, because it was Grand Theft Auto 3, wasn't it, if I
I think
recall?
I think
And
so.
then it was Vice City after that.
Vice
So
City,
it'd be interesting to
San
see when
Andreas.
the year that Grand Theft Auto 3 came out, and then the year that Drive came out, and how,
Oh.
and again, that influence of video games and that bleeding into the influence of certain
Hmm.
IP and films, and the sorts of films that a studio is going to pick up because they're going to go, oh, well, everybody's playing Grand Theft Auto at the minute. Let's
Yeah.
let's let's release a movie like this. But it
Yeah.
wasn't Grand
Even
Theft Auto. There's no
right.
known there. There's hardly any. There's the odd bit. There's Christina Hendricks' head getting blown off,
Uh-huh.
and then
And
that
then
incredible car chase sequence after
yeah.
after that's brilliant. Well,
Yeah,
before it.
the only really the only chase in the movie, I think, other than when
Mm,
when they're getting away in the beginning. You do have also the what I think probably would be the most kind of Grand Theft Auto moment is when he's got the hammer and goes to the strip club and
yeah,
he's like he forces that guy to swallow a bullet.
yeah,
He's using the hammer. There is a kind of video game kind of logic to his sort of quest
yes,
overall, a little bit,
absolutely.
I think. But yeah, going back to the driver, these there are so many people in this movie that I love. Isabella Johnny, I fell in love with last year when I started seeing more of her work.
She's
Um,
absolutely stunning. Like one
yes,
of the most beautiful
yeah,
faces ever to be
yeah,
put on screen.
yeah,
Like and not only that, there's something. It's the beguiling aspect she has as well.
hmm,
In the same way that if you watch like Eva Green, those sorts of actresses that not only are they beautiful, but there's just something slightly dangerous about them.
yes, and
Um,
yeah, especially the character she plays in this being kind of a card player and. She's living as much on the edge kind of as he is, and she every scene they have together, she's kind of matching his intensity and his
mm,
energy and she sees what happens in the beginning and then decides not to give him up, which
Mm.
then embroils them in this situation where he has to pay her off, and they sort of end up becoming unwitting accomplices. But she has a presence. I learned that this was the first kind of Hollywood movie that she took on
Mm.
after kind of initially breaking out
And then
overseas. And
surprisingly, she doesn't. It's not like she was then churning out
hmm
studio-based movies. She was still making, some of the most interesting, underground art house type
yeah,
films. I mean,
yeah,
Possession is a
yeah.
particular
Few
film.
years after this one.
Yeah, and that to me is it's not a film I go back to and religiously watch, but it's a deeply personal film. There's something about that I relate to so much, and there's something about her character and again what is happening in that film and her performance is
Oh, it's
just
unreal.
you've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Very obscure little film that maybe within the last sort of 10 years people have only just started to find out about
hmm
because of, the likes of certain labels putting the film out and word of mouth as well.
Yeah. It's all over
And
social media. I
yeah,
see it all the time now.
and there's a remake of it going to be made with Robert
Yeah.
Pattinson, apparently.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen the first Omen when it has the little
Yes.
nod to,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's funny because you watch it and your kind of cinephile brain is probably going, oh my God, I can't believe they just ripped that off. But then you
hmm
kind of have to, again, take a bit of a step back and think, well, for a commercial, something that's trying to be a commercial movie
hmm
and put in that kind of nod in there,
hmm
it's quite a brave thing to do because it is so full on,
And I
very
think
full on
also,
scene.
yeah, and I think also speaking to kind of just like preservation, because that scene, that actress doing a very specific kind of imitation,
Mm,
it leads to people discovering possession. It leads
exactly.
to
Which is
especially
what we were
young
talking about
people.
earlier.
Yeah, especially young
It's a
people, and
gateway.
yeah, certainly. This movie, my very favorite scene, which I actually just rewatched just this scene this morning, is when he's in the garage and is testing out that car, that beautiful yellow car where the wheel rims are actually matching the paint job
Mm.
of the car. He's in this garage. He's basically trying out for the job with these guys. The guy glasses, I noted, I thought he looked so familiar. Found out he is in Robert Altman's California Split. And Ronnie Blakely, of course, being another Robert Altman connection, her being in Nashville just a few years before this movie. I thought that was interesting that maybe these two guys knew each other or were. I mean, they must have been around the same kind of areas in the 70s at that time, Walter Hill and Robert Altman. But the sequence where he's showing off his skills as a driver, it seems also like Ryan O'Neal did a majority of this stunt driving. At least they make it look that way. You certainly believe it whenever he's behind the wheel, and then he just destroys this car.
Mm.
Just takes it, puts it through the paces, and is kind of just ultimately like a fuck you to these guys, and he's telling them that they need to find someone else. Bruce Dern is also pretty fantastic in this movie. I love his
Amazing.
kind of like
Yeah.
his really he's such which
A twat.
I mean yeah perfect yes, he's such a twat. And Bruce Dern is so good at playing those kinds of guys,
Yeah.
especially
He's
in
also
his
good at, but he's equally good at playing when he's given the opportunity. You look at Silent Running, and he's very good at
Mhm.
playing very human characters
I've still got to see that movie.
and
That one's
sympathetic characters. And in fact, Bruce Dern for me will always be the character in Silent Running. So when I ever do see him, being a complete arse,
mm-hmm.
it's can be quite hard to swallow sometimes. It's like because yeah, it's a kind of you're looking back, aren't you? It's a nostalgic thing on a character that is from your childhood, and you immediately you attach that character so heavily to an actor that when they
Mm-hmm.
then act in another way in a film, it can be quite hard to shape. But there's no denying how brilliant he is. And going back to what you're saying about that car chase, the dismantling of the car when he's
Mm-hmm.
like testing out his driving, the the fact that this is, I think, Walter Hill's second movie, if I
Mm-hmm.
recall. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it's his second film as a director. I cannot get over how well it's directed and taking on the car chases, and not just a car chase, but a confined space in a car lot, a car
Mm.
park that is then blocked out so well
Yeah.
to the point where they're literally, I don't know how many of those cars they had, whether they're doing it to the one car or whether they have
Right.
several versions of it, which are knackered at different stages. But
Right.
it's so seamless. It feels like they've literally just let the camera roll
Yeah.
and then wait until the thing has literally got no doors on it and it's like the paintwork's off it, and it's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Which there
Brilliant.
must have been tons of setups. I mean, you get so many different angles. The editing is so sharp in that sequence. It's really
Oh my
sharp
God, it's so good.
in the entire film. That I noticed the editing was just so well done, especially in the chase sequences. You get this with especially with Ryan O'Neal's character. There's always kind of, and I think this is echoed in Drive as well. Always kind of something just under the surface. He's like just about ready to explode at any
Mm,
moment, and even given like the great scene where he and Glasses are kind of facing off. And Glasses says something like, for a guy with your attitude, I can't believe you don't carry a gun because, Ryan
yeah.
O'Neal's he's pissing everybody off basically the whole movie because of how defiant he is and stuff. And then it turns out, of course, that he is carrying a gun.
Mm,
Um, and they call him Cowboy throughout the entire film. And
yeah.
that I think was the most kind of telling thing about this is taking a Western framework,
Yeah.
transmuting it to 70s. This is set in LA? Yeah, yeah, this is set in LA.
Yeah. LA.
Yeah. For a while watching it, I was like, is this San Francisco? Is it New York?
Mm,
And because it's not, they're not necessarily kind of drawing attention to the city like they do in Drive. Drive very much feels like this is an LA movie in the way that it's presented. But yes, this kind of sparse dialogue, always something kind of under the surface.
tight,
Um,
really tight. Like the
yes.
pacing of it is
Oh,
impeccable.
it's perfect. And at an hour and a
It's an
half, it's just like,
It's unbelievable.
yeah.
Like it's so well thought out. I mean, I'll come back to that, the sense of space in it, that the
Hmm.
idea of, taking a kind of John Ford view of internal and external spaces, and the landscape, but the sort of urbanized modern version of it. But I think it's worth touching on the fact that this film rests right at the very end of the New Hollywood era as well. So it's
Hmm.
got this it's got a feeling of it's an outsider movie. It makes it feel like an outsider movie because of it's grown up within that decade, but you wouldn't necessarily call it a new Hollywood movie.
Right.
It is what it is. It's its own vehicle, pardon the pun. It just feels like, the muscle of it. It just breathes by itself. But yeah, going back to what I was saying about Walter Hill's sort of look and the way he's directing something, that he is seeing the Western and he's directing it exactly like a Western. And he's treating the internal spaces in the same way that if John Ford is, in a saloon, or, he's in I don't know, an interior homestead, and then he's treating the cityscape literally as like the open space and the frontier, and it's just that. And then that he touches upon that again in the interview. He was trying to make a Western, and he does
Hmm.
eventually make a Western, but
Right.
he's making something that he is purposefully trying to reconfigure in the same way that Leone came along and did his own version, but made a Western, i.e., a
Right.
period piece. It's interesting because he's that transparent in saying, well, this is how I was trying to build my films, was just give them a slightly, I'm taking my influence, but I'm giving it a different flavor. It's the same way you could look at The Warriors. Again, it's another Western.
Hmm.
It's a chase movie, but it's on foot. If you look at Streets of Fire as well,
Love Streets of Fire.
that is such a again, a film you just can't really nail that to a particular period because it's like, what is this? It's like
It's
a rockabilly.
yeah,
It's not a musical, but it feels like a musical.
it's
But
almost outside
it's
of time completely.
in
That
the
film.
same way Buckaroo Banzai is. It's like
Hmm.
Streets of Fire would be a perfect kind of double bill with Buckaroo Banzai because it
Hmm.
kind of feels like a yeah a film that defies genre.
Yeah.
That's him really at that point trying to push his approach to filmmaking as far as he can. And I think some people will look at a Walter Hill movie on the surface because I think this is why his films are so brilliant. On the surface, first glance, they appear very shallow.
Hmm.
I think some people, in terms of the general public and cinema goers, will lap it up and they'll just like, that's what
Yeah.
they want. They want something
Yeah.
really easy going.
It's
Then the
very
cinephile
approachable.
sees it. Yeah, very approachable.
Yeah.
And then the cinephile comes along and goes, oh my God, do you know what? There is far more to this
Hmm.
that most people wouldn't really care to look at.
Right.
It's so yeah, it's surface, but there's a lot in there. Whereas some films, are very obviously you watch them and you go, "This is of such high quality," and there is clearly some other stuff happening in this that I want to that keeps me thinking after the film. Walter Hill movie, take it
Hmm.
or leave it. You
Yeah.
kind of come away and you go, "I was really entertained by that," or go and look at other films and influences or think about it
Hmm.
for, years to come.
Yeah. I think the way he uses nighttime, these really inky dark blacks
Mm,
filling many parts of the frame is a kind of similar is a sort of analog parallel to the way many Western filmmakers use the open kind of wide open empty landscape of the West. I just rewatched The Warriors last night, a film that takes place entirely at nighttime
mm,
until they get home at the very end and as the sun is starting to come up. Incredible movie. Just I mean, I loved it the first time I saw it. I recently picked up the Shout or excuse me Arrow edition. A lot of things I had forgotten about that he's kind of mixing up in here. Almost this kind of like it's almost a Shakespearean kind of the
definitely.
way that these characters are talking to each other and the things that as they're moving along that they encounter.
Mm,
It's yeah, he's mixing up a lot of different stuff in that, but I love the way that he utilizes night and the
mm,
space of this dark, empty, black space, and the way that is then reflected in the characters and in the situations that they go through. In this movie, the driver, every character being kind of hard to get a handle on. I think the Bruce Dern's cop probably is the most kind of archetypal. I think in the way that he acts and his goals, his motivations. But for the driver, you kind of can't really get a handle on what his ultimate motivations are. He's sort of just
mm,
I mean, he's clearly kind of very much out for himself, but
mm,
there also seems to be this other thing. There's a moment in the beginning after the first job, the guys are saying something about, well, we'll do better next time, and he goes, there won't be a next time, and it's almost as if like, is this guy trying to get out of this life? Is he trying to
mm,
get to a certain kind of financial threshold so that he can move on and do something more reputable? And then, the driver in Drive, I think is such an interesting character because he uses his number one skill in both a typical day job gig and a very illegal kind of nighttime gig.
mm,
He moonlights either way you want to look at it. He either moonlights as a stuntman or he moonlights as a getaway driver. And then his other job is working on cars in the garage with Shannon, Bryan Cranston's character. So his entire life is kind of revolves around this act of driving. In contrast to the driver, where Ryan O'Neal doesn't have a line for 15 minutes,
mm,
this film, Drive begins with his dialogue. It begins with him laying out the stakes and laying out his rules for what he's going to do. And I love anytime a character is introduced by kind of telling you a set of rules or rubric that they're going to go by, because inevitably they're going to have to break all of that, right? They're going to have to break from their own personal rules or conventions. And the real arc that this character goes through is kind of shocking. I mean, the ending of this movie still shocks me to this day, having seen it a few times. And I think that largely rests on Ryan Gosling's performance, and of course Nicolas Winding Refn's kind of ability to have this, something he does in a lot of his films, of the potential for violence for much of the film, and then the kind of ultimate like unleashing of that violence, especially in
And
the last
it's
kind of
the
third.
juxtaposition as well between him embracing the violence full on,
Mm-hmm.
yet the emotional aspect and how he feels about Carey Mulligan's character is there's this sort of distancing until the very moment where then he decides to embrace her.
Yeah.
And then it's that very moment
Immediately
then that
followed by,
sparks the
yeah,
explosion of violence, which is so graphic
yes,
and so in your face. Like the head stomp in the elevator is
yeah,
just like, oh my God.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's full on, full on. Brilliant cast as well.
Great
I
cast.
always love Ron Perlman just turning
Yes.
up in something. He's always again similar with Peter Weller, Lance Henriksen, that kind of trio of actors that are just really good supportive actors, but
Always.
character actors and
Yeah.
charismatic, and they only need to be on screen like a few seconds, and they'll just rob the whole movie
Uh-huh.
almost. They're so
Yeah.
good. Um,
Casting, the sort of casting against type of Albert Brooks is so
mm,
brilliant in this movie.
mm,
He is so menacing, and he shaved his eyebrows in order to look more kind of like emotionally cold and distant. And apparently he even, the first time they met for the part, he even kind of got a little rough with Winding Refn, sort of in character, kind of pushed him against the wall, I think, and they had this very interesting like kinetic first meeting, which won him the role, I think. And yeah, seeing him do this kind of thing is wild, and I wish he would do it again. I wish someone would
mm.
kind of give him another part like this, because he gets a moment where he stabs this guy with a knife in the middle of it, and it's so, if you know Albert Brooks movies, or if you've kind of grown up seeing him do one particular type thing, the thing that he's most well known for, it's stunning. It's stunning to watch him do this kind of role. I love Bryan Cranston in this movie too.
Yeah,
Um,
he's probably the
him,
most sympathetic character in it.
oh, for sure, and him
Mm,
like kind of becoming the audience surrogate for a relationship with the driver who is
mm.
so closed off and distant, and Cranston doing a thing where he's filling a lot of the empty space. He's like improving a lot. He's doing he's talking fast. He's talking for the audience, with the audience, and driver just being kind of just accepting it all. They have a really interesting kind of special relationship. I think this movie, much more than the previous film, is much more invested in character relationships. I mean, the first 30 minutes, I think, is really just all setting up the interaction between Driver and Irene. And
Mm.
I had kind of forgotten how sort of slow and low that first half hour is, up until the point that Standard, Oscar Isaac's character, gets out of prison and is talking about this money that he owes and the job that they have to do. But yeah, the parallels to the most kind of interesting one that I noted this time watching it was the Christina Hendricks character kind of being the companion character to Ronnie Blakely's character, of the connection in the driver. Even the
Mm.
way they get their scenes, each of them only have like two, maybe three scenes, and the way they are killed in each of those scenes felt like just like they were almost trying to match that up in a very
Yes.
similar way.
Are
And
you
then of
talking
course
about the moment where he puts the pillow over her head?
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah,
yeah, definitely.
she sort of gives up.
Mm.
The driver reveals their plan, and then yeah, that guy kills her. This was a very similar one, and then the move that is definitely just completely replicated of when the driver kind of whips into a parking lot, dark parking lot, and flips the lights off. That's complete.
Mm.
That's pulled whole cloth in the opening sequence of this movie, which I love. I think it's really smart having that bubbling score right
Mm.
underneath, and him listening to the radio, listening to the baseball game or whatever it is that's getting out, and then he pulls into that parking garage just as the game's getting out, timing it. There's a lot about timing, I think, in this movie. He
Yeah,
was using that
definitely.
wristwatch.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
love that. I love that aspect of it. Such a
yeah,
nice little detail.
yeah. I think the first time I really kind of really started noticing Ryan Gosling as an actor, and this
Mm.
starts kind of a really strong period of his career. I feel like where he's picking a lot of really cool, interesting projects
Yes.
and utilizing his cachet as a movie star to get this made, to get Only God Forgives made.
Also, how versatile he is,
Doing
though.
thing, yeah, yeah, incredibly so.
So,
Place
yeah,
Beyond
on
the
the part.
Pines,
Yeah,
another
Place. Oh,
amazing
amazing
performance.
film. And
Yeah.
then Lost River that he directed, which I
Hmm.
think Winding Refn executive produced, I
Something
think,
like that.
maybe. I'm pretty sure that he's linked to it somehow. I think it's also how it starts to show sort of post Notebook that he wasn't going to turn into like another McConaughey,
Yeah, not
and have
just a
that kind of,
heartthrob.
no, not that kind of period of having just sort of do these romantic comedies that Gosling is diverse and not just in his choices, but the sorts of characters he plays. He can go from uber serious to then really funny
Oh yes,
and
the
just
Nice Guys,
laugh out loud funny. Yeah,
incredibly funny,
Nice
and
Guys, Crazy
that's
Stupid Love,
yeah.
which was absolutely amazing. It's just one after the other around this time.
Hmm.
In fact, I think Crazy Stupid Love might even be the same year as Drive.
I believe
This is
so. Yeah,
2011, isn't it?
11.
If I
Hmm.
recall. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. So back to back, he's got these two films that are very, very different. Yeah, amazing. It's not, to be honest, it's not I would really struggle to find fault in either of these films. For me, they're kind of perfect little movies in their own right.
yeah.
The Driver is more accessible.
Hmm.
I think you would be able to. It's a safer movie. There's moments in it that are quite violent, but it's not like gratuitously violent.
Yeah,
Um, I think in fact, it would be a very good film to show somebody who is fairly young a 70s movie.
yeah,
You know that
absolutely.
it's not sexually explicit. The violence is often off screen or covered, whereas Drive is an absolute no go.
Hmm.
You just
Yeah,
you hold
yeah,
back on that for as long as possible, but when you are of that, yeah, the right age and the legal age to be watching a film
yeah,
like that, it's gonna like hit home.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean the turn from this movie, ostensibly kind of which is a heist movie up until sort of the middle of it to this incredibly violent I mean the last 20-30 minutes it almost becomes like a slasher movie. He puts on that
yes,
mask
yeah,
and is
yeah,
going after each kind of individual member of the gang, of the family,
mm,
who the money is owed to. He goes after Perlman, Nino Perlman's character, and then Albert Brooks's character.
yeah. He puts on the
Um,
stuntman mask, doesn't he, from
yeah,
the stunt
yeah,
drive
from
and for the
yeah,
flame for the fire stunts,
yeah,
and
uh,
it's interesting how you see that in the context of him doing the stunt work, and then as soon as it's taken out of context of the stunt work, it becomes Michael Myers.
it's like a horror
It's
film. Even the way
really
he's
clever.
behaving in
Mm.
those scenes, and underneath it, the way he kind of blankly stares and moves very slowly. That scene on the beach, that is Perlman with him on the beach, correct?
Yes,
At the
yeah, if I
yeah,
recall.
yeah, when he drowns him in the surf. That great shot that's just very slowly pulling back.
Mm. Have you
Um,
seen the version that Zane Lowe, the British DJ,
no,
did,
I
where
need
it's
to.
rescored basically?
Yeah.
It's kind of sacrilege. You kind of watch it because, like,
I
coming on
know.
what I was saying about the relationship to the film,
Yeah.
Zane Lowe's a great DJ and the sorts
Hmm.
of music that he's introduced us all to over the years. But yeah, I mean, it's different and it's worth watching. It gets a different feel to it, but you're just not going to top what how I think it's Clint Mansell, wasn't it? And
Cliff
obviously
Martinez.
Cliff Martinez. That's it. I
Yeah,
always get Clint Mansell and him
I do
mixed up.
too. And
Yeah, and
they
then
both
the
worked with
use of
him as
music.
well.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing. Is Clint Mansell the one out of Populate itself? Pretty sure. Did he go on to do? I have to look that up. It's
Probably.
bugging me because did he do the Darren Aronofsky one,
Yeah, he's worked with
Requiem for a
Aronofsky.
Dream? I think it is him,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
used to listen to Populate itself
I'm not very
all the
familiar.
time. They're basically an early 90s British band, indie band,
Hmm.
and it's very interesting to listen to in hindsight of what he's gone on to become. He's become this incredible soundtrack artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had this career in Populate itself, and
Yeah.
it's brilliant music. It's really kind of flipping off the wall and definitely of its time. So there was Populate itself, and then there was Ned's Atomic Dustbin, and
Okay.
there were two bands
That's
that
a
were very,
great title.
yeah, very
Great
similar
name.
to each other. And I think I think Ned's it's either Populate itself or Ned's Atomic Dustbin. I can't remember what the track was because there were two bands that just bled into each other for me.
Yeah.
And they did this track, and it was heavily sampling Akira, and
Oh, cool.
it was so good. This track,
Yeah.
really, really good. Yeah, very
Mm.
again nostalgic period.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, around this time, I think, speaking about, what you were talking about in the beginning of this time being kind of the launch pad of the whole synth wave, vapor
Mm,
wave, kind of very retro aesthetic of the pinks and blues, but a lot of chrome, metallic
definitely.
things, even I mean, the person that, the composer Refn initially wanted, this guy Johnny Jewel, who is in a lot of those kinds of bands. A lot of those, Chromatics, I think, is the one he's probably best known
Well,
for.
yeah, Chromatics
Yeah,
are on
and
it. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure
yeah,
they're
they're
on the
on,
score. Yeah.
and he worked on kind of mixing some stuff as well. And that, yeah, there is a lot of things that feel like it comes out of this movie or from around that moment that have very interestingly, and along with this film itself, I think, sort of kind of disappeared from the public consciousness. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of these things. This movie kind of feels like it's a little bit been lost to time. I don't really
mm.
hear a lot of people speaking on it or many people writing on it anymore.
But it
I
is much
mean,
loved. When you
oh
bring it
yeah,
up, it's
certainly,
much loved.
yeah, very much
Um,
a modern cult classic, I think.
I think the music, what again, coming back to that aspect of it, what spun out of it. If when you listen to the Outrun album that Kavinsky made on the back of the success of Night Call,
Hmm.
that's a fascinating album in itself because I often give the album cover to students as a kind of basically like a little afternoon session. So
Yeah.
they'll take the album cover and it's all about dissecting the Americana of it all. So it's taking the cover and it's looking at the art direction. It's looking at the Ferrari Testarossa, right? Okay, so what's the Ferrari Testarossa linked to? So we can look at right the album's called Outrun. There's a big clue, right? Then we look at the computer game Outrun from the 1980s. Then we
Mm.
look at the character that Kavinsky is playing in the album. It's a concept album about a jock that dies in a car accident that comes back to life in this car and is basically driving around LA at night. And that's what the first trilogy of music videos out of that album are. They're these incredible pieces of cinema. They look
Hmm.
like movies from the 1980s, and they all each video bleeds into the next.
Mm.
So there's so much. It's a great little thing to give the students because they just go down this rabbit hole and they start like looking at, I start to show them Bullet, and I say, right, well, how would you link Bullet to this?
Yeah.
And how do you then, sort of take that character of Steve McQueen and what the character that Kavinsky is playing is all well, the scene in here is exactly like in Terminator 2. So then there's all of this aspect of American cinema, Billy the
Hmm.
Kid, the
Yeah.
West
Yeah.
again, going back to
Yeah.
the Western. So it goes back, it comes full circle to what I was saying. My relationship with this film is absolutely a lineage based thing that
Yeah.
I love to latch onto. And I recall and I remember what I learned through that movie and what spun out of it. And I think it's always very interesting to just drop something in lessons sometimes at degree level and
Mm-hmm.
just sort of give them a little bit of the thing about, what is context, and
Yeah.
how do we look at the influence and the art of inspiration and that idea that there's no such thing really as an original piece of art.
Yeah.
And that's how important it is to be informed by everything around you and history and culture. And so you can actually rebuild and reconfigure and put your own voice on it. That's
Yeah.
what all of these things have done out of this film. Kavinsky put his own drive Western spin on it,
Mm-hmm.
and created a musical landscape out of that, and decided, yeah, well, do you know what? I'm going to be a character as well. I'm going to be the driver.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do again what Walter Hill did with the Western with Driver, what Wyndham Refn's done with it. I'm going to reconfigure now, and I'm going to be this like I'm going to create something postmodern and
Yeah.
smash everything together. Fascinating. I love all of that sort of stuff. The
Me
ephemera
too.
of everything.
Yeah, me too. I mean, those are all the things that I love most to examine on this podcast of
Mm.
finding where these things come from, how they connect to each other, how they can be a predictor for futures of cinema and things. Historical context, I mean, is the biggest thing that I try to bring to my audience, especially because it feels like so often, especially like online film discourse, is just so very focused on, examining the kind of surface level of a film, of whether
Mm.
whether or not it worked, whether or not its box office was a success.
I'm not really having
And
a discussion
yeah,
necessarily. That's
exactly.
the only
Yeah.
problem. It's like as great as the internet can be, and I'm always saying this term of, that it does feel a bit like you're wading through treacle, and
Hmm.
there's so much to try and find, but you've got to try and know. You could need to know where it is. You
Hmm.
need to kind of. That's why curation is. We need to come back to that. There needs to be people who are pointing others to the cream of the crop,
Hmm.
the best of the best, the worst of the worst.
Hmm.
Not the sort of quagmire of everything that, well, if you don't know what you're looking for, then you're never going to find it. This is why
Yeah.
editors are so important. This is why magazines were so important. And
Yeah.
I know they're not as, there's not many as published now, but at least when you picked up a magazine, you knew that editor's job was to curate and source the best material for that 4 weeks and then
Yeah.
put it into print. And then you're given that on paper, and then you're given a really solid starting point of where you want
Yeah.
to go and look. Books, that's why books are still important. Just because a book was written in 1966 does not make it irrelevant. In fact, it probably makes it more relevant than ever.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the less people there are that are reading that book, then that proves it all the more to me. I always go in
Yeah.
the opposite direction. I think, well, that's why I'm always leaning towards when somebody, when there's a film that is usually quite heavily criticized, and you think, oh my God, this is divisive. Well, it makes for a more interesting
Hmm.
thing to go and look at, because you're going to forge your own opinion. I always sort of go in the opposite direction. If there's a film that is constantly being spoken about and always in the public limelight and always getting praised and is winning all these awards, I like to kind of let the noise die down a little, because I
Yes.
know I'm going to be disappointed,
Yeah.
because my brain will automatically just put it on such a high pedestal. I want to come in at the level that I have a degree of control over. And
Yeah.
then I'm not coming
Absolutely.
away from it thinking, seriously, how is that?
Hmm.
I don't understand. Why is everybody raving about that? Whereas if
Yeah.
you come in and you kind of let the noise die down a bit, then at least you're coming in at sort of
On your own
a
terms.
level approach on your own terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
for
I mean,
like having stuff rammed down my throat.
I'm the same, and that's also why I don't typically cover new things on the
No.
show. I want to have plenty of space and time from it in order to contextualize it. And the biggest thing I've been seeing online lately is all these people complaining about Honora, about it just being a
Mm,
darker version of Pretty Woman. And it's like,
mm.
well, have you watched other movies other than Pretty Woman? Do you know
Yeah.
actually what, all of these other films that he's pulling from, and trying to tell a very modern story that is also very much a classical fairy tale, that where we can
Mm.
point out specific archetypes of kind of modern myth that cinema is so good at helping us understand.
I mean, by
Um,
default, I will always watch a Sean Baker movie.
yeah.
They're not, I know for starters that every time he makes a film, then he's going to give me a snapshot of lives that
Mm,
I am so far removed from,
yeah.
and that I'm not necessarily going to see that kind of deprivation or
Yeah.
those kinds of characters or be within that kind of circle of characters.
And the
And
level of care he puts
yeah, care is
into,
unbelievable and
yeah.
truthfulness as well.
Yeah.
And also, I had respect for him before. I have 100 times more respect for him now in terms of how he's using his platform to collect his Oscar and his and all the other awards he's getting to actually champion not just cinema but physical media.
Yeah.
Absolute
Yeah.
respect because
Yeah.
the guy's like he's exactly like us.
Hmm.
He loves this.
Yeah.
He's a huge fan of Second Sight. Um, he'll just push and mention names
Hmm.
where he thinks, right, it's my opportunity to do this because he wants people to be keeping this alive. He knows how
Yeah.
difficult it is to make a movie independently, not for a
Yes.
studio, which is that whether I'm going to watch a Nora and like it or not, that to me is irrelevant. It's
Yeah.
like who he is as a filmmaker. That's going to be a subjective opinion regardless. I just have massive respect for him. He's an
Yeah.
incredible like
S-
advocate for all of that. And we
Yeah. Such
need
a
more
great,
filmmakers like that are open and ready to have that discussion about the state of what cinema is and where cinema ends up on our shelves. I think is absolutely crucial. So the likes of if you've got Sean Baker or the Video Archives or any other podcast, even your own podcast, getting a voice on there and saying, no, this is where we're at. This is what it should be about. People need to be reading more. They need to be
mhm.
educating themselves. You don't need to necessarily go to university, um, or pay for a degree. It's about having the motivation to just look for something of interest
Yeah.
and engage with it and find your tribe.